I almost said no. I was 16, standing in my parents' basement, about to tell my father I was turning down the first kid who'd ever asked me for drum lessons. Because my first thought was, who am I to teach drums? I'd been playing since I was 6, professional at 9, bow tie and all, there are pictures. But teaching? That was for real drummers, the ones with the degrees, names you'd actually heard of, not a 16-year-old who happened to start early. If I had said no that afternoon, I'd still be a decent drummer, but I wouldn't be whatever I am now. Because what my father told me that afternoon taught me the one thing most people in 2026 are getting completely wrong about expertise. And 25 years later, that conversation is still running in my head. Here's how it went. My father was at his desk when I came down the stairs. His office was in the basement. He called it his cave. He was working on something, probably paying bills or balancing the checkbook. That's what Sundays were for him. I came down there and laid it all out. This kid wanted lessons and I wasn't qualified. I wasn't old enough. What could I possibly teach him that he couldn't find in a book or figure out on his own? My father looked at me like I was missing the most obvious thing in the world. He said he doesn't need a world-renowned drummer. He needs someone who just walked the path he's walking. You were in his shoes a few years ago. That's not a weakness. That's the whole thing. You're exactly who he needs. I didn't fully buy it in that moment, but I took the lesson, and then I took another one, and another one. By my senior year, I had a handful of students rotating through. And there was one moment that year that changed everything for me. One of my students called to tell me he had joined a band. They had their first gig coming up. It was a Saturday night, a private event at a restaurant. He asked me to come. I showed up and slipped in through the kitchen. I didn't want to interfere with the party, so I just stood there and watched him play from the back of the room. I'll never forget that moment, watching a kid I'd been teaching actually performing, holding it down in front of a room full of people. Every doubt I had about being too young, not qualified enough, all of it, evaporated. He didn't need the best drummer in the world. He just needed someone who was a few steps ahead. Now, here's why this matters in 2026. The creator economy right now does not reward the most expert voice. It rewards the most relatable one. The person who figured out something 6 months ago and is willing to show you how. The operator, not the guru. Scroll through your own feed. Think about who you actually trust. I bet it's not the person with 20 years of credentials and a list of logos behind them. It's the person who is stuck exactly where you're stuck, found a way through, and broke it down for you in language that sounds human. AI has made expertise cheap. Every topic has 1,000 voices claiming authority. What's rare now is somebody willing to be honest about where they are actually a few steps ahead, not a few mountains ahead. So here's what this means for you practically. If you've been waiting to teach something until you're the expert, you're waiting for the wrong signal. The question isn't, am I qualified? The question is, who's 6 months behind where I am right now? Because that's your audience. The people teaching Claude Code after 3 months of using it. The ones teaching Notion systems they're still building in public. The ones on LinkedIn breaking down a sales tactic they tested last Tuesday. They're not faking expertise, they're just refusing to pretend they don't have what they have. And here's the part that nobody tells you about teaching. When I started giving those drum lessons at 16, I thought I was giving up practice time, trading my own development for a few extra dollars on the weekends. I was wrong. The students I taught made me a better drummer. Not in a metaphorical way, literally, mechanically, a better drummer. When you've been playing since you were 6, you stop thinking about the fundamentals. You don't drill rudiments anymore, you just play. But the moment I had to walk a beginner through a paradiddle, or a single stroke roll, or a basic rock groove, I had to slow down and see it again. I had to name the thing I'd been doing on autopilot. I had to find mistakes I didn't even know I was making. I remember going back to a book called Syncopation by Ted Reed. It's the first book I ever used when I started taking lessons at 6, and it's the book I use with all my students. I had to sit down with it and had to figure out how to explain triplets, how they land against the beat. Triplets are tricky, harder to teach than eighth notes, harder to teach than even 16th notes. And in the process of figuring out how to explain them, I understood them better myself than I ever had. Teaching didn't take away time from my practice, it was my practice. So here's the second practical takeaway. If there's a skill you want to actually master, the fastest path is not more practice, it's teaching it. Find one person 6 months behind you. Explain what you know. You'll find the gaps in your own understanding faster than any other method I've ever come across. The byproduct of teaching is mastery. Writing about a skill forces you to actually have it. Explaining a system to another person is the fastest way to see where your own system leaks. Making a video about something you've figured out makes you understand it on a level you never would have gone to alone. Whatever you want to own, teach it. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Who's a few steps behind you right now? Not a few mountains, a few steps. Somebody who's where you were 6 months ago, or even a year ago, or 5 years ago. Somebody who would pay real attention if you turned around and showed them what you just figured out. You don't have to be the best. You have to be useful. You don't have to have a degree. You have to have walked the path. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. The person behind you already thinks you are. My father couldn't have known, sitting in his cave on a Sunday balancing his checkbook, that the reframe he gave me that afternoon would still be running in my mind 25 years later. Every time I sit down to write a newsletter, every time I post something on LinkedIn, every time I say yes to a stage I don't feel qualified for, that conversation is still doing work. So here's what I'd do if I were you. Pick one thing you've figured out. Find one person who hasn't, and go for it. Somebody's a few steps behind you right now, and they're waiting for you to turn around. Don't wait until you feel ready. If this resonated, hit subscribe. I put out a new video every week, and I'd love to have you around. And if you want the deeper version of what we talked about today, I write a weekly newsletter called Elliot's Keynotes. The link's in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.